Welcome back to the Snowpoint Cast. Today we're going to be interviewing Jimmy Ballard, who got second at Worlds in 2006. Welcome to the show, Jimmy. How are you doing?
Not bad. You know, social distancing and just kind of keeping my time all to myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said you were working on your store too, right?
Yeah, we are. We were going to close in June to have our carpet replaced, but we kind of accelerated that plan. So.
Okay, so let's get right into the interview. So in 2006, you played Eeveelutions, which is actually, it's one of the most interesting decks that I think has come out of that format. How did you get to the decision of playing Eeveelutions in Worlds? What led up to that decision?
I knew all along I was going to play it. I really kicked myself in the butt for not playing it at Nationals, but
what did you play at Nationals?
That was a deck that I played all year. The deck I played at Nationals was Raichu, Marowak. So I was on the Delta bandwagon, but I didn't have the Executor. I had Marowak instead, and ended up running into some horrible matchups. I think I got 3 ZREs right in a row, and just got my clock cleaned. So, but it's kind of cool that I didn't play it there, because then people would have seen it for Worlds.
They would have known about Eeveelutions, especially if you did well with it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I played that deck all year. I played it at Battle Roads and cities and regionals up in Michigan.
Yeah.
And every time I played the deck, changes were made, and it just kind of, no pun intended, it just evolved over the year.
Yeah. Okay. So, and you just it wasn't a read on the meta. You just kind of like the deck, and you like how the deck worked, or?
Oh, actually, the deck started off as Dark Muck with Flareon EX.
Wow.
So basically what I was trying to do is confuse and poison the active, and then keep it in the active spot, so they couldn't get out of it. And a lot of things weren't running switch cards at the time. I think the best card was Brinies. Some decks were running 1, maybe 2 switch, but you'd burn those up fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, I played around with that, early in the year, and then I took out the Muck and swapped in the Pidgeot line, and instead of just going with the standard 2-1-2 Pidgeot for search, I actually used that thing to clutch, and that was the whole idea, is that you burn and confuse with full flame, clutch them in the active spot.
And they're kind of stuck, confused, burn, not having any good options kind of thing.
And, back then, it's not like now. Back then, you confuse something, you burn or confuse something, they lose their abilities. So in the active, like Dragonite or Metagross, and really just put them in a really awkward position if they can't use those.
Yeah, for sure.
Those
Especially
powers.
if you just POW hand extension something in the active that's really essential, and you start hitting it with.
Oh no, I would use Umbreon.
Oh yeah, that's right. Did you play a POW?
No, didn't. Nope.
Nope, just Umbreon. I mean, Umbreon's better than POW, really.
And I don't run POW in there at all.
Okay, so what is your favorite part of the Eeveelutions list, and why?
Oh, Jesus.
I know it's a big question. There's a lot.
The best thing I had going for me that year is, I had about easily 1,000 games, because both of my kids were competitive players and juniors and at the time. So, I'd come home from work and play with them. And then, the Celio twins would meet at my house in Lyons, Illinois. And, I had a couple other buddies, Dan and Tom. We had a really strong group, 7 to 10 players that would come to my house on Friday nights, and we would just play all the way through Sunday night, and just figuring it out and building. And what I had over everyone else with this deck is I knew the limitations of their deck, and they didn't know the limitations of mine.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of one of the benefits of playing a rogue.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't build it to auto-win any specific matchup. I built it to play chess. I built it to compete, and I wanted to 50-50 any deck that I've seen, and then just try and outplay it. The decks are that deck's gonna lose to awful hands. the deck's going to lose to, lone Pidgey starts. I mean, stuff like that happened all the time, but, anytime he got past turn 3 with his deck, it was just chess.
And you have so many options.
It was super fun to play.
Yeah, like you have an insane amount of options with the deck with, what's the teleporter, the like exclamation mark, what's that card called? A time machine, surprise time machine. Yeah, like just being able to
surprise time machine.
Just being able to surprise time machine into like other like evolutions and getting those abilities back. It just like seems like you have so many options, which I guess brings me to my next question. So there's parts of the deck that the average player might miss, and like looking at the list, it seems harder to pilot than a lot of other decks from that format. So if you had any advice for people who are like, I want to pick up this deck and play it, what are some things that you think that the average player would go over their head, they wouldn't think about it?
Well, the main thing I see people making mistakes is they don't attack with Pidgeot. They just use Pidgeot to search.
Right.
And the deck is built to attack with Pidgeot. That's why the WP energies and the FF energies are in there, because Pidgeot's an attacker. It's in there to attack.
Yeah,
not
Clutch
just
is a great attack.
Sit on the bench and look pretty. It's in there to be one of the main attackers, and that's why the WP and FF are in there to protect it. Because the WP it doesn't auto win you the Queen matchup, but between Stump and WP, it makes it really, really difficult for Nidoqueen to keep up with the deck.
Yeah, just for I'm gonna like take a step back because we both know 2006. I'm just gonna like explain a little bit. So Holland Energy WP, when you have a basic water energy attached to one of your Pokemon, it stops effects of attack. So Toxic becomes a lot less effective. Dragtrode can't use like Drag Off and stuff like that. What other uses does like Holland WP have? What other places was it good?
It obviously stopped Toxic. Anything that places damage counters, anything that it also prevents Clutch.
Oh.
I don't know if people thought about that either. So any effects of attack. So like they couldn't clutch my Pidgeot with the WP on it, but I could clutch theirs.
So you could rotate through Pidgeots.
So there were little games like that inside the game,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess that comes down to like the chess part of it is like, that it stops effects of attack, but you also in turn have to know all the effects of attack that your opponent is playing for that to be like really useful.
So the discard energy was another one. There was something out there. I forget what it is at the time, but there's something out there. And then, like you said, Sneasel would drag off. It would prevent that, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a lot of interesting parts of that deck that it's like a really deep deck. How many games did you get in with that deck before Worlds, do you think?
Easily 1,000 games that year.
Wow. Okay, what was
I'm not even exaggerating. Like, I'm serious. There was no way tennis back then was the big thing, right? And
yeah.
Like, I could barely work Discord. There was no way I was working Apprentice effectively. So
right.
we met at the mall, and we'd meet, at the house, and I'd come home and play games with the kids, like, every single day. So you start talking 3 to 5 games a day on the weekends, 5 to 10 to 20 games, each day. I easily had 1,000+ games in with that deck.
And do you think that's the kind of like grassroots Pokemon that made you like such a good player? It's just like, I'm going to sit down and play Pokemon a lot, and then you just become much better at the game by doing that?
Yeah, I mean, today's game is a little different, obviously. The access to information is far superior today than it was 14 years ago. So it's kind of hard to, people would just discount, oh, Jimmy's playing the deck, and, whatever, we're not going to worry about Jimmy, it's just the way that it always worked out, but it's like anything else, whether you're in soccer or football or chess or whatever it is, you get out of this what you put into it, and I put the time in, and I understood every card and how to attack certain matchups in certain manners. So, the deck on its own might be, tier 3 rogue, tier 4 rogue, because nobody can just pick it up and win with it. And in fact, over the years, I've heard more people say, oh, this deck sucks. I just can't get it to win,
Right. I actually heard that a lot.
But me playing it all those times that year, playing that deck time after time after time, and and understanding the matches that I lost and how I lost them and how I was going to attack it differently or change out one card, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was seriously just change out this for this matchup, and it ended up helping 2 or 3 other ones.
And it's really interesting.
The deck wasn't good standing on its own. It was good because I was piloting it with the experience needed.
Right, and it's interesting that you bring that up because I don't know if you remember the game we played. Was it at Toronto Regionals? I played Ludicargo and you played Eeveelutions. Was that at Toronto?
Yep.
Yeah, so when we played that game, that was the first time that I'd ever seen you pilot Eeveelutions, and like you piloted it crazy different. Like just watching how much you clutched, I was like, wow, man, I'm getting clutched a lot, and it's like it was a lot to handle. Like I didn't know what to do when I couldn't retreat like I remember there was one turn where you like brought up a Macargo with an Umbreon and you started clutching it, and I was like like
yeah, you just keep it there.
Yeah.
So my favorite play and the best play with the deck, and everybody should play this play, is it's very simple. You get a lot of decks that'll turn 1 Pidgeot on you. Spam Pidgeot. So all you just black cry the Pidgeot, bring it active, and then you lock it up there with the Umbreon. It does 20 and they can't use their ability.
Yep.
So now they can't quick search with Pidgeot.
And they also can't retreat, right?
Position, they can't retreat. 2 energy on it unless they attach 1 energy on their first turn. So it's sitting out there naked, can't retreat, can't use the ability. It's just a rock.
Yeah.
So the next turn, the math is perfect to Time Machine to Jolteon, attach the Howlon's Electrode, and it does 20 plus 10 for each damage counter on it. So it has 20 on it. You're doing 20 more. That's 40 times 2 weak because it's weak to lightning.
And that's a kill. That's a dead Pidgeot right there. That's a dead bird.
Plus 20 is a perfect KO. So they get to use their Pidgeot one time. And a lot of times players would play, like they'd go Pidgeot and they'd quick search like a basic or something and leave their hand as crap knowing that they had Pidgeot.
Right.
So when you lock that up, you really lock up that game. It's similar to like killing the Smeargle turn 1 or turn 2. You know, it's very, you just set them so far behind because they were expecting that Pidgeot the following turn.
Right. That's such a cool play, actually. And you need
yeah, that was probably one of my favorite plays.
Yeah, definitely a cool play. Did you have any games in Worlds 2006? I know you got to second, and the Manectric matchup's like negative on your side, I think. But did you have any games that were like?
No.
You don't think so? You don't think the Manectric matchup's bad for you?
I don't think Manectric's got negative on my side. I just think Jason and I had enough games in because we used to play over at Orland Park Mall, and you know we had enough games in with that matchup where if he hit the heads on the burn flip, you know that game pretty much swung in his favor. But if he hits tails on the burn flip and the Mew dies with the energy, it puts him way behind.
Right.
So both games, they were super fast games because we knew the matchup.
Yeah.
But both games he hit heads on the burn flip, so I had him locked in the active. I had him locked in the active, had the Mew locked in the active both games, and you know had it burn and confused with full flame out. So if he hits tails on the burn flip, the Mew dies. And then he's got no energy in play, and he has to restart while I'm sitting there with.
And at that point, when you're missing
2 energy or an Eevee with 2 energy or whatever.
Yeah, and when you're missing trainer lock at that point, like you pretty much
both times and had to switch both times. So
what would you put the matchup of like Manectric versus Eeveelutions? Like, do you think it's like 50-50?
I think it's 60-40 in their favor, easily.
In their favor.
In their favor, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought you said.
For the Eeveelution match to keep them on their toes is, you know, Umbreon, Time Machine, Espeon. You could Espeon scoop up Manectric and admin it into their hand. Like there's other plays.
Mm-hmm.
If they just attack you outright with Manectric, it's very difficult because you can't get to 100 in one turn. It's just impossible.
And you don't really have anything that
you can do some Flareon, like you can do Flareon stuff with full flame, but if you're disconnect locked, you can't even get full flame in play. That makes the strength charms useless as well. So it was just a relentless 40. But if the deck attacks you with Mew, more because the Espeon can just come out and pop it.
Yeah.
since they lock a stadium in play, Espeon's doing 90 outright. So it puts them in a spot where I think it's called, what is it, double shot or something? They got to hit the bench. So it puts them in a spot where you could break the disconnect lock.
Mega Shot. Mega Shot is the name of that deck.
Yeah, Mega Shot, yeah. So it puts them in a spot where you could break the disconnect lock. And if you do that, then, man, all those trainers are suddenly up for grabs.
Surprise time machines.
But they usually don't Mega Shot until they could win the game with that. So I would easily say it's 60-40, 70-30 their favor, but I did know some of the tricks. And again, it's going to come down to burn flips.
Yeah, burn flips.
If you're burned and clutch active and you can't retreat out of it and you flip tails to attack with confusion, stuff happens. So it could literally come down to the burn flips.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Jason having that matchup knowledge on you definitely didn't do you any favors when you're playing a tier 3/4 rogue, like compared to Manectric that is clearly a tier 1 deck.
Yeah, no, I've seen it, and I'll be completely honest with you. 40 damage didn't scare me at all. I totally got this, not even worried about it. But by the time I got to Jason, let's be realistic here. I'm a rogue player, have been the entire time I've played the game. I played bullshit decks here and there, but by the time I got to Jason, I was free rolling. I was just happy to be in that seat.
Right.
I shouldn't have been there. I'm a rogue player who, tries to make the cut in 31st place because the decks I build are usually set up to play 1st through 8th, not, the first 3 rounds of Swiss. You know what I mean? So right. I always built my decks trying to make sure I'm competent enough to play against the top 8 decks.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely good advice if you're trying to build a rogue, is try to beat the decks that you're going to see in the later rounds, not the ones that you're going to see in round 1 to 3 Swiss, for sure. Would there be any changes that you'd make to the list, or do you think you played the perfect 60 for the event?
Well, I don't think there is a perfect 60 because I give you the list and you would play 2 to 3 cards different, right? It's all based on play style and knowledge of the deck, right? Mm-hmm. So, even look at Eric Nance's Meta Knight had a Mewtwo and a Ray in it, but he knew that and he knew how to use that. So not a lot of people who play that deck can pull that off successfully. So, it's all about play style. I think I played the perfect 60 for me. Mm. If I were to fit one more card in, it would definitely be the second Retriever. Because going through those EVs as quickly as you do, Retriever is super important.
Yeah, it's nice to just get a EX back and just play it on an EV too.
Yeah, I think I more used it to get EVs back than anything. Whether I could shuffle, 3 in or take 1 back, because the old rare candy rule worked back then too. Right. So you could take an EV out and then rare candy right to a Flareon for another burn confuse lock. So there's lots of cool tricks with the deck, and so many tricks. I was playing a game and I had a Jolteon on the bench naked up against a Blastoise. I had, he just killed my Pidgeot, and I had Espeon with 2 energies, but the only way I could kill the Blastoise was with the Jolteon, and I just time machine the Espeon in and didn't take anything out. And then, time machine the Jolteon in and didn't take anything out, and then time machine the active Espeon to pull the Jolteon out and pop the Blastoise. And plays like that just win games. There's no way he thought I would be able to get 3 energy on that Jolteon in 1 turn. Right. So it's gimmicks like that my favorite play against Blastoise, if you guys are ever playing against that, is they attack you hard with Lugia. So you put yourself in a position where you could Strength Charm an Espeon for 40, and Lugia is weak, so it puts them at 80, which means they can't Rain Dance to the Lugia anymore. And
then they're also stuck.
They'll rain. Go ahead.
They're stuck too, right? They have to retreat.
Yeah, so they'll Rain Dance the 1, putting it at 90, so that they could retreat and then bring out Latias or whatever to attack. Well, that just sets up a 3 or a 4 prize KO in a turn, 1 or 2 turns later.
Yeah, because being able to snipe that with Jolteon is really good.
Yeah, it's awesome to pull it off when you stump them first and then strength charm the Espeon. And that it sets up such awesome plays, man. That was so much fun.
Even just like hearing you talk about it, like you're clearly the most knowledgeable person on the deck, and like just to hear you like, oh yeah, there's this really cool Black Cry into surprise time machine into Jolteon play you can do against Pidgeot, and it's like I didn't even know that was a thing before I talked to you about it.
You could surprise time machine. So I actually got locked up one time, and he locked my Pidgeot active before I had WP on it. So I surprised time machine down from a Pidgeot to a Pidgeotto because it was rare candy, just so I could retreat and attack the Pidgeot.
What?
So there's crazy plays like that, like you wouldn't even think about it. And then, against Queen, the second game in the top 4, I time machined 2 Umbreons with 90 damage on them just so I didn't give up the 2 prizes. I just gave up the 1 prize Eevee. So it's things like that can hurt if you're not looking for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and those are the kind of plays that you really understand when you get like 1,000 games of the deck. Like that's clearly like a very deep, knowledgeable play that you're making.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you against Meta Knight, you just you gust up the Dragonites, and that's how you attack that deck. It's weak to colorless. You gust up the Dragonite with Umbreon, and you just lock it in place, and they can't use the ability. So, and they only run 1 Briny. So the game for me early on was always get them to burn their switches, get them to burn their Brinies, get them so that later in the game you can guide the game, you steer the game. It was like driving a car, guide the game for them to make the mistake you need them to make to win the game.
Yeah, and part of that mistake is
play against the matchups, and you just kind of you give them just enough to get them to make that mistake, so you could take advantage of it.
Yeah, and as soon as they're out of those resources, like that's so good for you because you have so much control over their board with Black Cry and Clutch. Like as soon as they're out of those Switch and Brownies, there's probably not a lot they can do against whatever you want to do, really.
Right. And it burns up turns too, right? So, back then the game was 30 minutes and whoever's winning on prizes. That's the way it used to be.
Yep.
So with Clutch, it's same thing with Manectric. Same thing. 40 damage per turn. I've taken my turn. Now you got to take your turn and overextend to get out of it. And same thing with Clutch. I'm doing 40. I don't need to knock you out right now. I can knock you out in 3 turns. It doesn't matter.
Or Evolutionary Thunder or Devo Flash. Like the deck has so many options when you can just swoop in a Pokemon with an ability that you want to use and then just like find it and use it in the same turn. It's kind of crazy how many options you have. Okay, so I just want to like get into Dragonite. I know Dragonote's you had a few strategies that were interesting that I want to talk about Dragonite. So let's talk about Dragonite.
Into Dragonite. Dragonite is a 50-50 matchup. Like probably the most chess matchup ever. Somebody was asking me why I ran 2 Strength Charms. In order to get to those Sneasels, you had to drop a Jolteon, pop it with Flareon.
Drop a Jolteon and like pop the Sneasel in the active?
Yeah, you had to get 10 damage on both Sneasels, because they usually run 2.
Mm-hmm.
You had to get 10 damage on those stupid Sneasels, because otherwise you had no shot at killing that thing in one hit. And you have to be able to knock those 3 freaking energies off the board. Right. The other thing, too, is like people don't get the addition of ATM Rock allowed me, because Dragonite doesn't run any rare candies.
Yep.
So you can seriously keep them at bay by just using Espeon to scoop up their evolution. So every time they evolve into Dragonair, you just scoop it up with Espeon.
Mm-hmm. And then they're locked at that point.
Yeah, once you power up the Pidgeot to colorless, so that means Dratini and Dratini was 50 hit points. So Clutch with Strength Charm knocked out Dratini.
Wow.
And I'd off the board really made it difficult for them to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah. Especially like when they have to get a manual stage 2 out while you're doing whatever you want with stage 1s.
So the hardest game I played against Electrode was when someone had actually attacked me with Electrode. And that's why the FF went in there for Pidgeot, because now it became a 2 or 3 hit KO.
Right. And you can't afford to be getting hit for one shot's weakness.
Yeah, they have to extend turns and keep that energy committed to the active. You have an opportunity to get that energy out of play. And then again, same thing with the WP. You get a WP on the Pidgeot, you can lock up the Sneasel in the active spot. Sure, you may give up your Pidgeot because they're forced to knock it out, but they have to overcommit the energy, and it already has 4 damage on it. So you're able to respond pretty much with anything to knock it out.
Yeah, and having responses against Electrode is definitely really important in that matchup. If you don't have responses, they're just such an aggressive deck that they pop off on you for sure.
Yeah, but same thing. You can burn and confuse a Dragonite active if they don't have the Brinies, because they only run 1 Brinies. If they don't have the Brinies, they just move their energy to the bench. So if you've already done the 80 damage to the Dragonite, or I'm sorry, it's Dark Dragonite, yeah. So if you've already done the 80 damage and they want to pull it back to the bench and bring something else out, that's fine by me. Or just move their energy to the bench. You could just Umbreon the energy. So the really smart players, and we really had, I mean, back in those days, everyone you sat and played against was someone who could kick your butt in a second, man. I mean, these were highly skilled players, you know? So the mistakes that people make today with Electrode, because they're not accustomed to playing the deck, is, you know, I'll get that lock on the Dragonite, clutch it with Pidgeot, and they just move all their energy to the bench and just sacrifice the Dragonite while they're setting up a second one. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but you need to spread those energies out one to a bench, one each bench, you know what I mean? Because if you put it all on one, I'm going to kill it.
Yeah. For sure. You just Umbreon, Blackcry, and then do whatever you want to their board after that point.
Yeah, I mean, you just chase the energies.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so...
I mean,
sorry, you go ahead.
No, it was fun, definitely a fun matchup. I mean, we didn't play test Queen a whole lot. I played so many games against Ariades. Like, that matchup is insane with Eevees. It's so crazy.
Insanely good.
But, again, yeah, it's such a fun matchup. Like, the problem they have is that the Ariades are weak to Espeon. So you could Strength Charm. You could Strength Charm to kill it, or you can just hit them for 60, you know, and you set up multiples for Jolteon drop. And you just kill them all. And of course, there's up a Flareon active, to where you could just Time Machine to Vaporeon and pop that. So there's a lot of games where you can get 3 to 5 prizes in a turn against Ariades if you set it up properly.
That's interesting that you have that option to just do a board clear with this deck.
Oh yeah, it's pretty insane.
Yeah. Okay, so
it's pretty fun.
The last question I have for you today, do you have any advice for any players who want to become better at Pokemon? Like if someone's looking to become better, what would be the number one thing that you would recommend they do to become better?
And not someone else. I mean, right now, seriously, like right now we're just going to the internet and we're taking the cheap and easy way out. We're paying for articles and we're, you know, buying people's deck lists, and, you know, Prom is Prom because he's Prom. Prom's deck won't fit Johnny or Tommy.
Yeah.
That's Prom's deck list. That fits his play style. People need to find out who they are. I mean, you look at these guys who make the top tournament after tournament after tournament, but then how many other players in that tournament are playing their exact same list, because they got it off an article or whatever. They're part of their group, whatever it is. It's the guy who knows who he is and builds that deck around his play style.
And when you build that deck, you know like the purpose of every single tech. But when you net deck, you might not know why you're playing every card, kind of thing, right?
You don't understand it. Not only that, but let's face it, if Prom builds a deck, Prom's got 30 to 50 to 100 games in with it. You know, he theory mons for hours with, you know, his friends, I'm assuming, because that's just what we did, right? Theory mon was huge.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and then they understand why this card is in there for that matchup. You know, we don't have much of a timing thing in Pokemon, but there's timing within the match. Like, if you miss your timing on that one tech card, that card is a dead card the rest of the game.
For sure.
You'll never be able to use it again. So just be you, or don't be Prom.
So TLDR, stop net decking is the advice, and I definitely agree with that advice. That's good advice.
I mean, listen, it's great. You can go pull a 60-card list off, but don't pull a 60-card list off and go to a regionals and not understand why you went 2 and 7 and Prom with the same list is in the top 8. You know,
right.
The reason why is you pulled the list. You can net deck all you want. You know, people are making good money, spending time, you know, earning a living, doing that sort of stuff now. That's what they do. But man, don't pick it up and just show up the next day. Get 30 games in with it. Get 50 games in with it. Understand the matchups, because that might be the right 60 for you. But if you're not putting in the time, it's not you.
That's good advice. Okay, well, thanks so much for coming on the show. Are there any shout-outs that you want to give, or like where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, find me at Top Cut Events. You know, coronavirus has all my events shut down, both for Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, and it's got both of my brick and mortar shut down. So we opened up a little store on Top Cut Events to try and help us through the times. We got, you know, a bunch of graded cards and, you know, old regional merchandise and some Worlds merch, so on and so on. So if anyone feels like they want to support the Top Cut brand during this time of extreme need, Top Cut Events is where to be, topcutevents.com. Yeah,
I'll definitely link that in the description. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. This has been the interview with Jimmy Ballard. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.